Welcome back to the 411 on Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. Back with me once again, 411's Steve Cook. And the reason being, not just that Steve is a great individual, but he also has a great column that has just come out here as my dog has started to bark. Apparently the dog, Steve, also very excited about your top 7 wrestling pay-per-views of all time, which is the newest column you have up on the site at 41mania.com. And of course, the reasoning wasn't, it's fun to rank these, but Steve, there's been a little bit of buzz coming off of AEW All Out, and some people wondering, is AEW among the top wrestling pay-per-views of all time?
Was All Out one of the greatest shows of all time? It's an interesting conversation, interesting topic, if you will. Very divisive topic, I will say.
Yes.
Amongst the various wrestling crowds I run in, give a couple of shout outs to a couple of my wrestling crowds, like my folks at offteam.com, who are all big AEW fans. And most of them watched the All Out show, and most of them loved it and had themselves a great time. And then you have some of my homies over at thechairshot.com. I'll give them a shout out as well. Most of whom are not great AEW fans and did not have such a great time watching the show. So I think you're going to see some extremes on kind of both sides there. And as I say in the column, I'm the type of guy who likes to take a long view, let these things marinate a little bit and kind of, settle in and see what's up. And I think it's important right now for us to kind of take a look back at some of the stuff that happened in the past, just so we know what we're comparing things to. Because I think sometimes we forget exactly what happened in the past. We're all prisoners of the moment. We think that whatever happened now is the greatest thing of all time. That's when you need to have somebody remind you, hey, here's what happened before.
Yes. It's a good point, because I do think sometimes we're like, oh, it's the best show ever. But then it's like, oh, yeah, wait, I forgot about that show and that show and that show. And in the moment, I agree. And it was, like you said, give them credit. The response to that show was just something else. It's unlike any we've seen in a long time. And I think that's why it led to a lot of people wanting to put it in that discussion. And hey, this is why Steve did this column, is to see, would you put it above the 7 that Steve has on this list here? And I think that's where it gets very interesting. Some people probably would put it above that, and others, maybe if you grew up in a different era, and maybe you're more fond to the old school stuff or Attitude Era or anything like that, some of these other shows will rank higher. And so, as we always say, a subjective list for everyone. But Steve, let's run through some of these here, and let's start with your number 7, because this is a show that I think it's like, for me, it's one of the most memorable shows of all time. And I think that's, again, however you make your criteria on ranking your top 7, I think this will always, to me, go down as one of the most memorable shows, because this is where we talk about like a show just being completely different than anything we had seen before. A WWE produced ECW show in 2005, like that was unlike anything we had seen before.
And it was strange. It was amazing. ECW had only gone out of business like 4 years before. It wasn't that long that the doors had closed and people moved on different things, but in those 4 years, people still had that nostalgia. People really got into ECW, and the main reason this thing happened in the first place was because of the rise and fall of ECW DVD, which did some big sales. You remember DVDs back when those things were a thing?
They were a thing.
Love DVDs. They're great. Great, good stuff. But that sold very well, so that got people to notice, and they said, hey, let's have a show. We'll let Paul Heyman book it, because why the heck not? Tommy Dreamer will help him out, and it'll be a good time. And just up and down the card, just, I don't know if you have any 5-star matches on the show or not, but a lot of matches that make you feel good. My personal favorite was the Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka match.
Yeah.
Love that. Those two just went batshit insane. Pardon the phrase batshit, but whatever. And all the WWE wrestlers crowd got mad because those guys were just going crazy and killing the business. Oh, loved it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. The only blight on that match was Joey Styles' commentary. He was awful. Joey Styles. Ugh.
Joey Styles.
Okay.
Yeah, like you had, I'm looking back, like of course you look back at the card and everything, and just, there were so many good things. Because you had, the matches with Jericho and Storm, you had Benoit and Eddie, and of course the main event was your ECW style main event with the Dudleys and Dreamer and
Sandman's entrance. That was the Sandman's entrance highlight there, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what I say. Like, I think that's why, you can put one, and again, this is your list, but like these are the things, like the most memorable parts of shows. It doesn't always have to be, every match doesn't have to be 5 stars. I always say that. Like every match sort of has a different purpose, but I think for this show, it was so different than anything else we were used to seeing in WWE. And like it just felt fresh. And I think that's what a lot of people thought about All Out, is it just felt like a fresh pay-per-view. So
Of course,
yeah,
the downside there to this whole thing was it eventually led to the WWE version of ECW, which
yeah,
people will tell me wasn't so bad, but it just wasn't the same, man. It
no.
wasn't the same.
Wasn't the same, and a little bit different with how that went. I don't think, as we count things down, what was it, December to Dismember? Was that
Huh.
2006? Somewhere in there. I don't remember the exact year, but I'm pretty
Oh
sure
God, yeah,
that
it doesn't matter.
that one won't be
We
on
don't
your
try
list.
to remember
No,
that one too well. Well,
that will be on your worst, perhaps, 7 wrestling pay-per-views of all time. That is for another discussion. But as we go through the rest of the list here, number 6, you've got AAA When Worlds Collide, and this is one that we talked about before we started recording. This is back in '94. You've got just a pretty incredible assortment of talent here, and you talk about all the different wrestlers that are on this card. You've got Rey Mysterio, Psychosis. They're the ones making their debut on pay per view there. You've certainly got a lot of others like Eddie and Conan and La Parka, and up and down the line, of course, Art Bar. My goodness, like this is one of those shows that I think, even if you're thinking now, all right, a show in 1994, a AAA show, I'm glad you put this on here, because I think this is one certainly that you look back on and say, wow, like that felt like a pretty historical show for a lot of different reasons.
it absolutely was probably the high point AAA overall. And that tag team match with Guerrero and Art Bar against Octagon El Hijo del Santo, I'll put that up against almost any tag team match of all time. Almost any. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
few that are better, but that is just a great piece of business with the performance, the crowd heat, the story, everything going into it was just great. And you could see where the Love Machine and Eddie were a pretty big deal in Mexico. And they're looking to become a big deal in America as well. Unfortunately, Art Bar passes away not too long after the show. It also coincides with the Mexican economy taking a dive, and that leads to a lot of people leaving AAA. And you see Conan taking a bunch of the younger talent here to WCW, and a lot of things happen from there. There are very quick people tell that's part of the story than me, but this pretty much winds up being AAA's high point. And now they're still around, and they still do very well in Mexico. But it's kind of weird now because they can't actually premiere in the United States
Yeah.
due to some weird deal with the folks from Lucha Underground. It's a whole confusing situation, so they can't really do anything up here, which is a shame. Another guy, of course, that debuted on this pay per view, Louis Spicolli, who's the guy who got signed by WWF, went on to be Rad Radford and
Yeah.
bounced around. Unfortunately, and the show is kind of noted for this. A number of folks, like Art Barr, like Eddie, like Louis Spicolli, who sadly passed before their time.
Yep. This is one to, I'm sure it's available somewhere, to find.
Debut of La Parka also on pay per view. We
Yes.
can't forget L.A. Park, the L.A. Park version of La Parka. The original, if you
Yes.
will.
If you
We
will.
can't neglect La Parka.
No. Yeah, that's this is a good one. Again, I'm glad you put this on this list, because I don't know a lot of people, of course, which I haven't watched it recently, but I remember watching it. I guess that would have been probably 2 or 3 years ago now. I think I went back and watched it then, and yeah, like it just, there's so much on that card, and it's incredible to look back at sort of the talent that's on there and what they would go on to do in their careers. But like you said, certainly a high point for AAA
And
there.
at that point, they were selling big tickets in
Yeah.
L.A. and New York, Chicago. They were selling more tickets in those cities than the major wrestling companies were,
Yeah.
which is kind of amazing to think about. But then again, I mean, even back then, the Hispanic market is a lot bigger here, and we kind of give it cred for.
Yeah, and '94, as we know, was a pretty interesting year in wrestling, just based on a lot of stuff going on, and yeah, of course, coming off of everything in '93, and it's yeah, pretty interesting year for sure. All right, we going down the list here. We go forward a couple of years to 1997, and this was, I mean, this is ones too that it's incredible to think back that In Your House Canadian Stampede, like it had 4 matches on the card, like 4. Like that's
Yep.
it. That's all it had. I mean, it had the what was they call it? The free for all. I think there was a match on what was it? I think it was a tag team match on the free for all, from what I can best remember.
Yeah.
Looking at the card, I looked at it earlier, but yeah, 4 matches on this card, and you go up and down, and you're just like, all of these matches got time. Of course, we remember it for the main event. I think for a lot of people, certainly the 10-man tag where you've got the Heart Foundation against Austin, Shamrock, Goldust, and the Legion of Doom. And what a, I mean, that is still probably, Steve, in my opinion, like that's still one of your better WWF, WWE main events ever. Just in turn, like we talk about the crowd, like the crowd too was something I think a lot of people, you look at All Out and then you're saying, wow, like what a crowd, all the dynamics, everything in play. But like this main event, this atmosphere, unlike anything other we've seen a lot in wrestling, and it all came together perfectly. Talking about what the role was for the Hart Foundation at that time, where the storylines were headed, and to have that pay per view there, just a pretty unbelievable piece of business there.
Yeah, and with all due respect to the Chicago crowd from All Out, I don't want to disrespect those folks. This Calgary crowd is right up there with them.
Yeah,
It is very close. I might watch if I watch it tomorrow. I might say it's even better. Who knows? But Brett, Owen, Davey, Neidhart, Pillman coming out. Oh, they would get cheered against anybody. And this time period is so great from my perspective as a fan, just to watch how the different crowd reactions from week to week, because they were doing a lot of shows in Canada up at that point. So you go to Canada and all the Hearts would get cheered, and you go to America and they get booed. It's just a interesting dynamic to watch. And yes, this was a short show, only 4 matches on the card, and basically that means that nothing on the show is bad. A lot of these shows, you have a lot of stuff that's just kind of there. We make excuses for it. We call them like popcorn matches or filler matches or what have you. There wasn't any filler on the show. I mean, you
no,
had Triple H and Mankind opening things up, and we know that Triple H and Foley had quite the in-ring relationship for several years. And he had freaking great Sasuke and Taka Michinoku doing crazy stuff that nobody watching WWF had ever seen. You had Undertaker and Vader, two big hosses going at it, and then of course you had the main event, and the crowd going crazy throughout. And there's just nothing really bad to say about this show. I mean, the only downer I really have about the show is that last year me and Larry Zonka did a podcast about it, and it never got released. I had to
it's
look back, and I was hoping it got released, but unfortunately it did not. And now it's I don't. Who knows? Yeah, we will not be hearing it, I assume.
well, that's like you said. Everyone knows if you're listening to this podcast, you know the history and everything, and it's just I think about that show, and it's still like you said, like it's just still one of the most unique things ever. Like it's I think still to this day, like it is one of the most unique things WWE's done, and I think it was like it felt like the perfect sort of setup. And of course, we know where things would head.
You also
Eventually.
had the announcers. It wasn't just JR in a cowboy hat. You had Vince McMahon, Jerry Lawler in cowboy hats. So that's pretty good.
Anytime you get Vince and JR in cowboy hats, that's come on. So yes, that was. This is one that I think is very easy to go back and watch because, like you said, it's not one of those. Which, by the way, on a random note, I look back at everybody's talking about the debate between the WrestleMania one night or 2 nights. I look back at whatever I don't remember what, like one of the most recent WrestleMania, and I look down. I'm like, wait a second, is there 16, 17 matches on this card? I guess one of the one night ones. I assume that was one that went what, probably 5, 6 hours. And like it's just I think back and I'm like, wait a minute, uh, Canadian Stampede had 4 matches. A little bit different era there.
Uh, yeah, they started. I remember They started the kickoff show at like 5 o'clock, and I'm sure there weren't. I'm sure the matches were pretty soon after that, and they were going off at like 1 a.m. There
Incredible.
was that year in New Jersey where like most of the fans got stuck because
Yeah.
there was no bus service at that particular time of night, or just whatever bus subway, whatever it was. It was not operating at 1 o'clock in the morning, so people were not happy about that.
Yeah. Well, if you want a much more condensed show, this is the one for you because, like we mentioned, 4 matches. Go back and watch that one because it's still what an incredible crowd and just an incredible main event. But like I said, everything on there kind of serves its purpose on that one. All right, Steve, to your number 4, which this for me is it's always going to be probably in my top. It'll always probably be, in my top 3 or 4. I think that's probably about right. Great American Bash 1989. Some people probably consider it still, the best, perhaps. I know there's a lot of people would probably have that opinion. This was, if you go up and down the card here, you had Sting and Muta, which was a really good match. You had Steamboat and Luger, which I just was absolutely in love with. Like, I went back and watched this, I think probably about 2 years ago now, I remember, because I was doing some reviews then. And I mean, I was just remembering it, on first watch at the time I'd watched it before that, but going back and watching Luger and Steamboat, just an unbelievable match. I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. And then, you take that, even a step further, and you've still got War Games. You've got Flair and Terry Funk in the main event for the championship. Like, up and down this card, like even Brian Pillman and Wild Bill Irwin. Like, I thought that was a pretty solid match when I went back and watched it. There's just so much good stuff on this card. But I mean, you've got legitimately probably if you do the star ratings, like you've legitimately got 3 matches that are probably 4 and a quarter or higher, perhaps, for a lot of people. Steamboat Luger, War Games, and Flair Funk.
Not to mention Jim Cornette and Paulie Dangerously.
Well, yes. I mean, I thought that was just an automatic 5 stars without question.
It's definitely better than any business. That is a lot better than I think anybody thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it was funny. It was very entertaining.
Even the announcers, because Jim Ross and Bob Caudle were kind of crapping on it early on, then all of a sudden they realized, damn, these guys are actually doing stuff. What the hell?
I mean, look, Cornette's he's falling off a scaffold, right? Like, I mean, he's up for anything. So
probably not the most physical man of all time, but still managed to work somehow. But yeah, I mean, 1989, great period of WCW. We've talked about it over and over again. The Flair and Steamboat going straight in the Flair versus Funk. For smart wrestling fans, there's few better time periods of a North American wrestling company. The only downside was not so great. The business kind of was what it was at that point. They're working their way up. The Steamboat Flair feud kind of bugs me later on because watching it later, Steamboat just seemed like such a nerd to me. I mean, my God. But not the problem at this point with Flair and Funk going at it. And as I noted in the recent Ric Flair underappreciated opponents column, yes. Ric Flair is a babyface, definitely underappreciated. I love Flair's babyface. I wish he had done that more.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's, you think back to that run, especially in 89, as we know, everything that you got in 89, just with all of that, and then, just leading into 90, like there was just so much incredible stuff when you talk about some of those matches. And then, of course, Funk's return and the way that everything's set up with that, like just an incredible deal there when you look at some of that. But 89 still, with all the Flair Steamboat stuff, and like we said, Funk's return and everything, just pretty incredible when you think about it on that. So before we get into number 3 on Steve's list, Steve, I hope you're excited because you get to join me for the first time since we've brought on our friends at Manscaped. Because Manscaped is our new partner. Support for 411 Wrestling is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. They are the champions of the world, just like Ric Flair was in 1989. Manscaped offering precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched the 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right, the 4.0. You can join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer just for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the promo code 411wrestling at manscaped.com. I've said it before, the fine folks at Manscaped allowing me to be one of the first people to try this new Lawnmower 4.0, and I am blown away by the performance. I'm sure Ric Flair would have tried the Lawnmower, whatever number it would have been, back in 89, and that's why he became the champion. The craftsmanship, the details, that's all next level, and it's got everything you need, the multifunction on-off switch with the travel lock, so if you travel, it's great for that. It's got the LED spotlight for a more precise shave, so you can turn that on and off as well. And it's got the wireless charging. The new wireless charging system gives you longer battery length, so you can take your time because Manscaped has got you covered. And let's be honest, if you're still shaving your face and body with the same trimmer, you're doing it all wrong. Boost your confidence with this new body trimmer from Manscaped to make me time the best time with a smooth shave. 20% off, free shipping, promo code 411wrestling at manscaped.com. Use the best tools for the job. Again, 20% off, free shipping, promo code 411wrestling at manscaped.com. That's 20% off, free shipping, manscaped.com. Use the code 411wrestling. Unlock your confidence with the new Lawnmower 4.0 from Manscaped. Speaking, Steve.
So hold on a second. I have a question. I have a quick question about all that.
I just wanted to run it down for you because this was the first time. It's a very momentous moment here for you.
Well, I have a question. You said that 2 million people use this product.
2 million.
2 million people, because it's kind of funny you say that, because when I watched the next program here on the list, the Money in the Bank 2011 show, it felt like there were 2 million Chicagoans in attendance. Did it not?
Look at this. See, we didn't even record this beforehand. Like, this is just all impromptu. Like, this is Rock and Mankind. This is your life here. Like, this is what this is. Like, that was the best segue I think you could have given me. So I appreciate that.
Pretty good. I was impressed with myself as well, and certainly, and Money in the Bank 2011. It also ties in well to the whole AEW All Out discussion, because we're talking about CM Punk in Chicago. Pretty much a little over 10 years, 10 years and 2 months pretty much that separate these two shows. And it's interesting when you look back at the show, lots of good stuff going on. You had the Money in the Bank ladder matches before I was sick and tired of them. It was nice. Daniel Bryan, of course, winning one, which, ties in All Out as well. Alberto Del Rio, fortunately, did not tie in All Out. We didn't see him there.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness for that. Christian was there. He had a match with Randy Orton. It was pretty good, too.
Yeah. It's quite
of course, the whole thing here was CM Punk and John Cena.
Well,
and John Cena did his thing,
It was, that's what we talk about, like, memorable. Like, this is easily, I think this belongs certainly in that where you have it. In this top 3, because I can't think of a more, I don't know, like, it was one of those things that I'm sure, just depending on what your thoughts were going into the show, the setup it felt real. And when Punk wins, like, all of a sudden it clicks that part of your brain to where you're like, wait a second, like, this guy's leaving with the belt. And it was just such a cool deal. And like we talked about sort of with the Canadian Stampede thing, and it's different, but just having it in Chicago was such a huge deal. Just like All Out, like we said, to have Punk's return match there, and then of course to bring in Daniel Bryan, aka Bryan Danielson now, and Christian, was at this show in 2011 with his match with Randy Orton. Another just fantastic match. Those two, we talk about chemistry. My goodness, like, Christian Randy Orton is probably one of the most underrated. I guess I don't know what your list would look like on that in terms of chemistry between two wrestlers. Yeah. They were
Which
fantastic.
Is kind of ironic, because Christian and Randy Orton they're probably two wrestlers, when you say.
Yeah.
Where, like, sure, the fans appreciate Randy Orton and Christian, but I don't think they appreciate them as much as the wrestlers do, because you hear everybody talking about how great Randy Orton is. Whoever's in the ring for Randy Orton talks about how great he is. And it's the same thing with Christian. Everybody who's in the ring with those two guys just talks about how great they are. How, and you put those two guys together, and sure enough, barn burner.
Yeah, they were great. There's just so much that they did that was just so good. And you look at the rest, like you said, there's just a lot of good stuff here. Like, both Money in the Bank matches were great. Christian, Randy Orton, great, and then the main event, I don't know how it gets any better than that from just the standpoint of atmosphere, work rate, whatever you want to use. Like, just professional wrestling main event, like, that was it. Punk defeating Cena, taking the belt away. Now, we could certainly go into a whole other podcast on the follow-up to that, because I think that was one of the most disappointing, probably, follow-up part of that equation.
Yeah.
But this in and of itself,
but I think it worked out for Punk in the long run, because I think whether WWE is actually trying to make him go down the card or not, people certainly got that feeling, and I think it made CM Punk even more popular with the hardcore wrestling fans.
Yep, very true. And by the way, get well soon to Triple H. We're recording this on Wednesday, and apparently Triple H had underwent a heart procedure last week. So, of course, he was involved in the follow-up to the CM Punk, championship victory here, and that became a big part of the equation moving forward after that. But yeah, Money in the Bank 2011, an unbelievable show. And certainly, if you want to pop in a show to watch this week, a little reminisce, this is a good one. And I'm sure a lot of people have, Steve, leading up to CM Punk's return here recently in AEW. That's probably one that's been
Most
watched
likely, yeah.
quite a bit, I would think, considering that it is, one of the defining moments of his entire career. All right, number 2. This is one you said to me that you thought it's probably not going to be on a lot of people's lists, but I can't blame you for putting it on here because it still holds in terms of just one match. Like this is still, the magnitude of the main event of WrestleMania 3 with Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. It's still to me above everything else. Like it's still the one match that you're always going to think about in terms of just the magnitude of these two stars being in that spot. And then, oh, by the way, right, you get Savage and Steamboat, and you get some other good stuff as well. So I can't blame you for putting WrestleMania 2 on the or WrestleMania 3, not WrestleMania 2. My goodness.
No, WrestleMania 2 did not quite make the list, but
no.
Certainly WrestleMania 3. And it doesn't matter how many stars you give Hulk and Andre. I know everybody wants to say that the match didn't have the great work rate or whatever, brother, and we all know about how Hulk Hogan slammed the 900-pound Andre the Giant. Tore every muscle in his back. I think Andre died the next day, if you ask Hulk. But
in front of 250 million people, I think is what the attendance was there.
Yeah, 355 bazillion people. But it was still a big freaking deal. It gave the people what they wanted. It passed the torch to officially passed the torch to next generation. Hulkamania ran wild and lived forever, in large part thanks to Andre the Giant in this show. But of course, we can't forget that Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat had one of the greatest matches of all time.
Yep.
A match that, if you ask a lot of the top talents, like Chris Jericho, Edge, Christian, guys like that, guys that maybe weren't the biggest folks of all time, it kind of showed them that they could also be professional wrestlers. Because, they didn't really get the feeling when they saw Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. So they see Randy Savage and Steamboat doing that's like, hey, maybe we can do this. And then, of course, you had Roddy Piper's retirement match with Adrian Adonis.
Yep.
You had Jake the Snake and the Honky Tonk Man. And one of my personal favorite moments of all time, I don't care, I thought it was hilarious, when poor little Beaver.
I knew you were going to this.
Poor little Beaver, he decides to try to pick a fight with King Kong Bundy. And you know what? You just do not pick a fight with King Kong Bundy, because he'll slam your ass. He'll elbow drop your ass. And I don't think we ever saw Little Beaver again after this.
No. Well, it is interesting though to think about, right? Like I've had the slip of WrestleMania 2, but it's so interesting to think that King Kong Bundy goes to from a steel cage match in the main event of WrestleMania 2 against Hulk Hogan to, like you said, slamming Little Beaver. So maybe there's another one. You talk about people that go from one pay-per-view to the next the following year. I'm not sure there's perhaps a more different drop maybe than that. I would.
But you know what? Talk about maximizing your minutes. King Kong Bundy definitely did that. Made himself stand out on this show, for no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Little Beaver he had coming too. Come on now.
He did. Yeah, that's
that headdress, the way he's mocking King Kong Bundy. You just don't do that to that man. Hillbilly Jim, I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what he was thinking.
Listen. Ugh. Take 3 minutes, 25 seconds out of your day because, as we said earlier, Manscaped's giving you more time. So take 3 minutes, 25 seconds. Go back and watch King Kong Bundy, Little Tokyo, and Lord Littlebrook take on Little Beaver, Hillbilly Jim, and the Haiti Kid. So that's all you need. 3 minutes, 25 seconds.
You will crack a smile. I'm telling you, it's funny stuff.
No, it is. I totally enjoyed WrestleMania 3, and it's always one of those, like, if you want to pop in a pay-per-view to go back and watch a classic, that's probably the first one, because if you think about it, like WrestleMania 1, it was fine, like it's the first one, but we talked about WrestleMania 2, not a very good pay-per-view in my opinion. 4 had the tournament, which is appealing, but it just was really long, and you had a lot of matches, and it's one of those intimidating cards, I think, to watch from start to finish. And then 5, I think, is probably the next one that you get to, but I think 3 is always that first one I think back to, and I'm like, if I'm gonna pop in a classic pay-per-view from WWF, like, I'm gonna go to 3 probably before I go to anything, and then it's probably 6 after that would probably be my guess. So
yeah, and the whole build to the show is just great too. I mean, you had the Hulk Andre build and the Savage Steamboat build with Savage using the ring bell and Ricky Steamboat, was just a fantastic piece of business. You know, Adrian Adonis beating up Roddy Piper in the flower shop. Just Jake Roberts getting hit the guitar by Honky Tonk Man. Just run down the list. Just great angles leading into the show, and you can see why 93,000 people showed up there. Just this period of WWF, one of my personal favorite periods of WWF.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty awesome, and Steve and I will probably talk about that one at some point soon. We're gonna tell you kind of what we have in the works here at the end of the podcast. We're gonna work on something pretty fun here coming up, and I'm sure we'll get to this one at some point and go back and take a look at it in full. But that does lead us to number one on Steve's list, and I didn't know going into reading this what Steve was going to pick as number one, but had a pretty good idea since it was my number one as well, and I think it's a lot of people's number one. It's still the pay-per-view that I think we've probably talked about this before, but this is one that I think I always remember because to this day, Steve, I'll tell you, unless I think from start to finish is probably the best way to put it. I have never gone back and watched a pay-per-view from start to finish immediately after it was over, except for one. There's only one pay-per-view I've ever done that for, and that was WrestleMania 17. I remember sitting down, watching it through the first time. I immediately started it back, and I watched it all again the same night. And I don't even remember what I was doing the next day, but I can tell you I was probably pretty worthless because I was so mesmerized by what I had just seen. It's still considered the gold standard for so many people. Not surprised you ranked it number one. It's still number one on my list. Even I went back and watched it not long ago, and like it just still holds up for me. There's just so many things when you talk about, there is a historical aspect to it, and we know for the wrong reasons in some sense in terms of turning Austin heel, but there's just it's unbelievable. It's incredible, and this is probably going to stay number one for a lot of people, even if, like we said, AEW All Out moves up the list for some people. I don't think I'm putting it right here at WrestleMania 17 level.
Yeah, I mean, there are just a lot of reasons why the Austin heel turn didn't work. For one thing, doing it in Houston wasn't going to work. You weren't going to get those fans to boo the guy. Wasn't going to happen. And for another thing, you had Rock leaving the company to do a movie not too long after. Rock was probably the one guy you could run against Austin and make people boo Austin. So with Rock gone, they had to switch over to Undertaker and Kane, and that's just, no, people didn't really get along with that. And, well, then you had the Triple H joining the Triple H joining Steve Austin with a 2-man power trip, which it's okay, but it's not okay because we have spent how many months establishing that Triple H had Stone Cold Steve Austin run over with a car. We just had the big feud of Triple H and Austin with the 3 stages of hell, and Triple H getting dropped out of I don't even know. I don't even remember what he used to freaking drop that car.
Or something for the I don't remember what it was.
Some sort of contraption. They got dropped like 50 feet in a car. They did all this stuff to each other. Then they just randomly decide one day, oh, hey, now we're going to be a tag team. People didn't buy it. It didn't work. And then you just add the invasion stuff on top of it. It's just a recipe for disaster. So just not a great time. But this show, in fact, was a great time. Even if it had that crap ass finish, Austin versus Rock, in that atmosphere with that crowd, they could not have had a bad match. That was just not possible with those two. It was just top notch stuff. Yeah, Undertaker and Triple H had a good match there. I am a big fan of the Gimmick Battle Royal. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love Mean Gene and Bobby coming out to call it.
Yeah.
I love Bruce Pritchard and Jim Cornette trying to wrestle. That's funny. I love Iron Sheik winning that match because he can't take a bump over top rope.
He had no choice. He had to win.
No, he would have killed himself if he took a bump over top rope, so they kind of had to do it. And Sarge had put the Cobra clutch on and get his heat back afterwards for that feud, I guess. But, and TLC, but,
yeah.
A little crazy. And Vince and Shane were crazy. It's just, Then you had the Angle and Benoit match, which one as crazy as those guys could be from time to time. That I love that match because it wasn't quite that crazy.
Even and you brought this up in the article. Like I remember even the triple threat hardcore match. Like I thought that was pretty entertaining for what it was.
Oh yeah, Kane, Raven, Big Show.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember talking about that Larry Zonka. And really, the only downfall of that match was prior. I had convinced myself, considering what happened in previous WrestleManias, was that Pete Rose was going to make an appearance in this Hardcore Championship match and somehow win the Hardcore Championship. And I was so excited for that to happen, and sadly, it did not.
Well, if it was
Other than
today's
that, it was a good
WWE, he
match.
would. He would. Like he would come out today if they held the same scenario. He'd win it today.
Oh, he'd be a couple time 24/7 champion by now.
Yes, he would for sure. But yeah, I mean, WrestleMania 17, and you mentioned you and Larry talked about it. I'm going to put the link to that. You have it in the article. I'm going to put the link to that in the podcast notes as well. That way, if you want to go back and listen to that, you guys talked about that last. I guess it would have been last March, not this past March, but the one before. And yeah, it's just. I mean, what else can you say about this show? It's still, like I said, the gold standard for a lot of people. The one that you're always going to think back fondly, and like I mentioned, just for me personally, still to this day, the only show I again have watched from start to finish, and immediately watched it from start to finish after. Probably aside from Steve back in the day in the mid '90s when I was trying to find shows on the static channels, and I probably would have went
Yeah.
back and watched some of those, but I guess I really didn't watch it all that much other than listen to it afterwards. So that's a little bit different. But well, there's the list, and I guess Steve, after we've gone through it all, has our opinion changed on AW All Out or anything? I just, like you said, I'm with you. I think it's an interesting discussion, and I get why people have it, but it's just so hard. I think immediately after this close to place a show in sort of the historical, landscape of everything else, just because there's been so much wrestling, there have been so many shows that have just been, incredible, like these 7 we've talked about specifically on this podcast. But it's just, I always find it hard to place that until you get a little bit further away to have an idea of kind of what maybe just the show was in terms of standing up against the others.
It could end up being a very historically important show as well, of course,
Yeah.
depending on how things go with CM Punk and with Brian Danielson, Adam Cole, and Ruby Soho, and some other things that went down that show. It's a lot of it's gonna have to do with the follow up, like we saw with some of these shows, where although sometimes the follow up stinks and it actually ends up helping the show. So,
Yeah, that's
so
true.
maybe it ends up being the high point for AEW, and then we look back and say, "Wow, that AEW All Out 2021, we had such hopes for Brian Danielson, for Adam Cole, and all that." But yeah, it's I don't think I put in top 7 yet. Some of you may agree, some of you may disagree. I'm kind of wondering, Blake, are there any shows that you can think of off the top of your head where how you're just kind of thinking like, how the hell did he miss that one?
The one that came to mind for me, I actually made this list earlier because I had a feeling you were going to ask me this question. I will say there's always one show that I look back pretty fondly. I don't know where it ranks for a lot of people, but I think SummerSlam '02 is always going to be one that I'm gonna rank pretty highly. I just think there's so much on that show that it was a fun show, and again, for me, it's like I don't know exactly where I'd put that on my list, but I think that's probably always one that'll be in consideration for me because there was just so much to it. So I will put that one probably for me. I'm trying to think of others that would be in the mix. I guess WrestleMania 19. I don't want to say that show doesn't hold up as well, but I think still like I would probably put SummerSlam '02 ahead of that. But I think WrestleMania 19 is always one that I think I remember back sort of fondly. And as you can see, there's kind of a theme here. They're just in that era. I think there were just a lot of shows that kind of stood out. But um, I think you hit a lot of the ones I would have included. I mentioned like Great American Bash '89. That's always going to be on my top of my list, probably in the top 5. And then the others like we've talked about. So probably SummerSlam '02 would be the one I would answer to that.
Yeah, we did that one pretty recently, so yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So it would be being a dead horse if I included it. So
Go back and listen to that. We're not going to say it again. No. No, that is the one I'd probably go to because I think that was a really good show. So, but there you go. There are kind of what Steve had for the top 7 pay-per-views of all time. Like we said, I think that it's your opinion. If you think that AEW All Out should be ranked in there, which I'm sure if you're listening to this, Steve's column will have already been up for several hours on the website, and I'm sure you'll see a lot of responses to whether people think that AEW All Out should be ranked in there or not. So always a fun discussion in the comment section over at 41mania.com. We'll put the link again to Steve's column here in the show notes. And Steve, we're going to start doing something pretty fun here soon. Of course, we've been cranking up our YouTube channel. I've been talking about that over the past week or so. And we're going to have some fun and go back and kind of do some shorter episodes of the podcast that'll probably, maybe some of them will be exclusively just on YouTube. So that's why we keep pushing people to the channel there, as well as just this podcast. But we're going to look back, and we've got a series we're going to tentatively title as Wrestling Memories, which is just going to be you and I going back and discussing just some random stuff from the history of wrestling. And there's so much to choose from. Steve presented me with some different ideas that I'm already in love with. We're gonna take a stroll through memory lane and just talk about some random wrestling memories. We've brought up talking about the Stone Cold Steve Austin Booker T grocery store battle. Steve, that's going to be a fun one. I got a lot of questions to ask you about that. What your strategy would be in a grocery store match like these two, just kind of roll through there. And then you brought up the idea of doing Steiner math. That's another one that I think is, certainly could be an interesting discussion. This Is Your Life, that entire segment. There's so much fun we can have with that. So maybe King Kong Bundy will be included as well.
King Kong Bundy might be included. A lot of great memories of King Kong Bundy.
Yes.
Like the time he appeared on Married with Children. That's pretty good.
Maybe we should do that too. I think that would be fun. Maybe we should go back and watch that. We could also, was it Vader on Boy Meets World? We can add that one to the list.
Oh, yes.
There we go.
Mankind also making the Boy Meets World appearance.
Yes, we got a lot of ideas to work with. So, yes, we will.
The Bushwhackers on Family Matters.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Bushwhackers. Oh man. Well, there will probably be a lot of Bushwhackers content coming your way here when we start that series. So it will be a lot of fun. Like we said, be sure to check that out. I'll put the link as always to our YouTube channel in the show notes. We'll have that coming up. But Steve, anything else you want to plug before we hop off here? I'm sure you've got even more great stuff working in your mind currently.
Well, the big thing I got coming up right now that I'm working on over at thechairshot.com. Some of you who've been following me for a few years now, you might recall a few years back where I used to make gambling picks on the National Football League, and we're bringing that back this year, baby. We are bringing back the NFL picks, which means I get to write a lot of stuff about football, which I have a lot of fun doing. I don't know why. I just like having a lot of fun, just talking crap about these people. I enjoy it. Just talking shit about all these teams. You know what I mean?
Just a fun time.
I've already got some good stuff on Dallas Cowboys. Oh yeah, it's gonna be good.
A lot of fun. And when are you gonna start making bets on the wrestling? Come on, I feel like you need to be like the I don't know, like the true betting aficionado.
See, we do have the wrestling gambling picks over at the Chair Shot.
Yeah.
But the problem with the wrestling picks is, to be honest, the favorites usually win.
That is very true.
More often than not, the favorites win. You're just trying to find an underdog that might be a good bet, and yeah, it's tough. Like on SummerSlam, the one underdog that won was Charlotte Flair. And is Charlotte Flair really an underdog at any point ever?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people considered her a true underdog in that match, probably. So
no.
Yeah, you're right about that. But there is your piece of betting advice when it comes to wrestling betting from the one and only Steve Cook. But we'll have everything, like I said, in the show notes. So check that all out there. Check out everything we got going over 411mania.com. News, reviews, columns, it's all there. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Search for 411 on Wrestling. Any podcast app you use, check out our YouTube channel. And also, as always, we'll have a link to the GoFundMe for Larry Hawkins' family in the show notes as well. Be sure to continue to contribute and share that if you can, and everything else, 411mania.com. But thanks as always for listening to the podcast, and we'll talk to you next time here on the 411 on Wrestling Podcast.